We're going to do some learning together today. And we're going to have an opportunity soon to do even more learning today at Kiddush. We have our first Shabbat Torah study coming up today, 12:30 to 1:30, give or take, probably a Newmark Hall. Everyone's welcome. Stay tuned. I'll announce it at Kiddush when we're about to start, but we're going to do some learning together right now. So if you want to follow along with your eyes as well as your ears, you can open your Siddur to page 110. Page 110. That's where we'll start. So this is a section of our Siddur that some of us are very familiar with. We see it every Shabbat. But this is a section that some of us are a little bit less familiar with. It comes pretty early in our service. During our service, we read it in Hebrew, but right now we'll look at it in English. And this is the paragraph at the first red aleph. And in English it reads, "May it be your will, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, to grant our portion in your Torah. May we be disciples of Aaron the priest, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving our fellow creatures, and drawing them near to the Torah." So we say this every week. And we actually also say the same paragraph on weekdays as well when we daven on weekdays. There's a strong association with Aaron and peace. And it's lovely. Peace is lovely. But what's really interesting is that the association with Aaron and peace can be traced back to this week's parashah. And if you recall from our Torah reading, this is actually not the part that we read out loud from the Sefer Torah this morning, but Parashat Ki Tisa is not exactly a parashah that talks a lot about peace. At the beginning of the parashah, which we did read today from our Sefer Torah, the Torah discusses details of building the tabernacle. At the end of the parashah, the Torah discusses Moses and the relationship between God and Moses. And in the middle of the parashah, the Torah tells the story of the golden calf. So when you read the details of this story of the golden calf, it seems like this would not be Aaron's finest moment. It seems like this would not be the episode that earns Aaron special recognition. But let's take a look. We read in chapter 32, verse 1, if you don't want to follow along with your eyes. It's page 529 on Eitz Chaim Chumash. Page 529, Exodus chapter 32, verse 1. And you can just follow along with your ears too, that works. And our Torah reads, we'll read in English. "When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, 'Come, make us a god who shall go before us. For that man Moses who brought us from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him.'" Okay, so take a moment, look up from the text and think about in your view, in your imagination, in that moment, what good leadership might have looked like. Okay, so now let's read what Aaron did. Aaron said to them, "Take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." And all the people took off the gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. This he took from them and cast into a mold and made it into a molten calf. And they exclaimed, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron announced, "Tomorrow shall be a festival of the Lord." Early next day, the people offered up burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. They sat down to eat and drink, and then rose to dance. Now, meanwhile, back on Mount Sinai, God and Moses are still hanging out, and God starts to notice that something is amiss, and he says to Moses, "Hurry down the mountain, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have acted basely. They have been quick to turn aside from the way that I enjoined upon them. They have made themselves a molten calf and bowed low to it and sacrificed to it, saying, 'This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt.'" Okay, so from the plain meaning of the story, what we can take from reading our translated words of Torah, it's looking like Aaron has made a mistake. It's looking like Aaron is responsible for a really not great situation unfolding when he's in a position of leadership and responsibility. But Jewish tradition, in the Midrash and in the Talmud and in a couple of other places, Jewish tradition is quick to argue in Aaron's defense. Our ancient scholars looked at the Hebrew words of the Torah, changed around some vowels, added a generous sprinkle of creativity, and came up with another explanation. This version of the story is as follows. Before the people gathered against Aaron, which we read in chapter 32, verse 1, they had gathered against Hur, Aaron's brother-in-law, who heard about this golden calf plan and said, "How about we don't make a golden calf?" Hur stands up to the mob, and he's violently killed. And in that context, Aaron says, well, if I don't listen to them now, they'll do to me as they did to Hur. They'll never have a remedy for the sin of murder. It's better for them to worship a golden calf, as it's possible for them to have a remedy for that through repentance, through teshuvah. And that's actually only one of 3 different explanations given for why what Aaron did was actually a good idea. Here are the other 2. First, from the Zohar. Aaron was trying to buy time. That part where he asked for all the gold rings from the people, saying, tomorrow we'll bring offerings. Moses could have come down the mountain at any time and stopped any of this from happening. Aaron was just doing his best to pacify the people until that moment of Moses coming home arrived. And here's another explanation. This is a very creative one from the medieval commentator Ibn Ezra. Actually, building the golden calf was totally okay because the people were not looking for a substitute for God, they were looking for a substitute for Moses. And actually, Ibn Ezra says, it was a very small minority of people who said of the golden calf, this is your God. And for this very small minority, of course, Aaron couldn't be blamed. Very creative. We might learn these 3 different explanations for why Aaron did what he did. We might feel convinced, but then we read the interaction between Moses and Aaron after Moses returns from the mountain. In the words of our H. Chaim commentary, we'll actually turn ahead now to page 534. Page 534. The question that Moses asks Aaron is actually a harsh rebuke. So we read in chapter 32, verse 21. Moses said to Aaron, "What did this people do to you that you have brought such great sin upon them?" Aaron said, "Let not my Lord be enraged. You know that this people is bent on evil. They said to me, 'Make us a god to lead us for that man Moses who brought us from the land of Egypt. We don't know what has happened to him.' So I said to them, 'Whoever has gold, take it off.' They gave it to me. I hurled it into the fire, and out came this calf." This line always reminds me of the movie Clerks. Maybe some of you have seen it, maybe not. It's a silly movie, kind of a cult classic that has this repeating line, "I'm not even supposed to be here today." Like Aaron in our parashah, that line from the film illustrates an unfulfilled desire to abdicate responsibility. Aaron's words are as if he doesn't even know what happened. And they don't match the story we read just 20 verses earlier. In the words of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Aaron blames the people. He suggests he had no choice, he was passive, things just happened. He minimizes the significance of what has transpired. This is not good leadership, this is weakness. But here's the thing. Aaron isn't remembered by our tradition as weak or passive. Aaron is remembered by our tradition as a role model. As we read in our Siddur, the text that began our learning today, may we be disciples of Aaron the priest, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving our fellow creatures and drawing them near to the Torah. Aaron shows us that sometimes leaders need to be generous with their people, even beyond the bounds of what might be reasonable. Earlier this week, I was studying this text with some students, and I found myself coming down pretty harshly against Aaron. But as we looked at the traditional explanations of why Aaron did what he did, I found myself beginning to relate. I remembered an experience I had teaching a class. Now, we all know some classes are a little bit more out of control than others. This particular class, let's just say they weren't very interested in playing by the rules. So, this is actually what they teach educators to do these days. I constructed an elaborate point system. Every moment in the classroom was an opportunity to either earn points or fail to earn points. There were points assigned for each question on every worksheet, points for conduct, points for effort. Before every lesson, I had to assign points to each activity, and after every lesson, I had to grade each student against the rubric, inputting their scores to track and share with their parents. It was a tremendous amount of effort. One might say we were worshiping the false god of points rather than the true god of learning. But it kept the difficult students in the room from, instead of being suspended, it kept them in the classroom. It kept them from breaking pencils and throwing things at one another, at least most of the time. Sometimes the metric of leadership has to be adjusted depending on what's happening with the people who are being led. There's a beautiful teaching of Aaron as peacemaker that comes from Avot de Rabbi Natan, a collection of midrash. When Aaron would walk down the road and Aaron would come upon a wicked person, he would wish him shalom. The next day, when that wicked man wanted to sin, he would stop himself and say, well, if I sin now, how will I be able to look Aaron in the face the next time I see him? I'll be so embarrassed when he wishes me shalom the next time. And so this wicked man would stop himself from sinning. Rabbi Dan Orenstein reads this and notes this is all well and good, but it could pretty easily backfire. The wicked person could just as easily understand Aaron's gracious gesture as justification for continued wrongdoing. Now, back in the text of our Torah, it's Moses and not Aaron who brings this episode to the end. Chapter 32, verse 26. This is on page 535. We read, Moses stood up in the gate of the camp and said, whoever is for the Lord, come here. All the Levites rallied to him. Skipping down to the bottom of the page, verse 30, the next day Moses said to the people, you have been guilty of a great sin, yet I will now go up to the Lord, and perhaps I may win forgiveness for your sin. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks puts it simply, Moses was a man of truth, Aaron was a man of peace. And in leadership, we need both. We need our leaders. I'm not just talking about in our nations and our synagogues. I'm talking about leaders in our workplaces and our families as well. We need our leaders to both speak the truth and be gentle advocates and pursuers of peace. Rabbi Dan Orenstein concludes we shouldn't try to be exactly like Aaron, pursuing peace seemingly at any cost. Instead, we should strive to be disciples of Aaron, learning from his example and then applying it through the lens of our own judgment. We all know from living in this world, striving for peace is difficult and at times impossible. Yet we can learn from Aaron both what to do and what not to do. Sometimes we must be the voice of truth. We should not pursue peace when doing so would be harmful. Yet we must never give up on peace. We must never give up on gentleness. Truth alone won't solve our problems, all of us know that. So we must keep peace within our vision, even when peace seems impossible, especially when peace seems impossible. We must remember that peace is part of our solution. Shabbat Shalom.